But especially when it came to me and my mom, I think he wanted to protect us and not to use us, so to speak, for his career and for his writing. And to him, that was the most precious thing, was what we had. And, you know, that wasn't to be mixed up with the rest of it. And it was something I dealt with, too, of figuring out how much to share in this book. But I decided, looking to his example of how he spoke about his father, and realizing that it's different when you're raising someone who's going to grow into the words that you've said versus someone who's left and who you want to honor and celebrate and let the world know about, which was how I
did a beautiful job, Daniel, and he was so proud of you, which goes without saying. CharlesKrauthammer.com is the website where everyone can go to find all of this together. Good to see you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so
Daniel.
much.
That is it for tonight. We will see you back here tomorrow night with more of the story as we move forward. Definitely get a copy of The Point of It All, Charles Krauthammer. Put it next to your bed and read it as you can. We'll be back tomorrow night. Tucker Carlson's up next in Washington, D.C. after this.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. If you've been watching television recently, you've probably heard the bad news. The Trump administration is over, toast, cooked, done for good, and along with it, any hope of the middle-class revolution that 63 million Americans voted for 2 years ago. The reason for this tragedy is simple. The president has been caught committing felonies. Here's what the legal experts without law degrees are saying on television.
If precedent means anything in the Trump era, Donald Trump must be impeached because of the crimes prosecutors say he committed in the Michael Cohen case.
Both parties need to get on board to pass articles of impeachment.
You have conspiracy, you have obstruction, you have campaigns finance, and you have emoluments. If the Democrats do not pursue this vigorously, they will be in some ways held accountable for abdicating their responsibility. It goes to the moral question, the ethical question. Democracy is at stake.
This criminal must be brought up by the Congress of the United States for impeachment.
We're not going to show you the Don Lemon tape. There's a lot of emotion there. But to sum up, they're telling us that we're staring down the barrel of a constitutional crisis. And that crisis stems from what MSNBC describes as, quote, the crimes prosecutors say the president committed in the Michael Cohen case. Which crimes were those? We have the answer. The relevant details were spelled out in a piece that ran over the weekend in the New York Times under this headline, quote, prosecutors say Trump directed illegal payments during campaign. The gist of the story is this. Trump's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, has told federal prosecutors that he facilitated payments to 2 women who said they had affairs with Donald Trump. And then, well, actually, that's it. That's the entire story right there. Paying these 2 women, say federal prosecutors and their flacks at NBC News, was a serious crime, a crime worthy of impeachment, if not indictment. Okay, but you might be wondering, how exactly is that criminal? Well, we're going to explain it to you. We're going to start by stipulating that everything Michael Cohen has told the feds is absolutely true. Now, assuming honesty isn't usually a wise idea with Michael Cohen, but for the sake of argument in this case, everything he says is true. Why is what Cohen is alleging a criminal offense? Remember the facts of the story. These are undisputed. 2 women approached Donald Trump and threatened to ruin his career and humiliate his family if he doesn't give them money. Now, that sounds like a classic case of extortion. Yet, for whatever reason, Trump caves to it, and he directs Michael Cohen to pay the ransom. Now, more than 2 years later, Trump is a felon for doing this. It doesn't seem to make any sense. Oh, but you're not a federal prosecutor on a political mission. If you were a federal prosecutor on a political mission, you would construe those extortion payments as campaign contributions. You do this even though the money in question did not come from or go to Donald Trump's presidential campaign. Then you'd claim that Trump and Michael Cohen violated campaign finance law because they didn't publicly disclose those payments, despite the fact that disclosing them would nullify the reason for making them in the first place, which was to keep the whole thing secret. That is the argument you would make, both in federal court and through your proxies on cable television. It is insultingly stupid, but because everyone in power hates the target of your investigation, nobody would question you. And that's what's happening right now. Now, by this reasoning, any money a political candidate spends to maintain or protect his image while running for office now qualifies as a regulated campaign donation and has to be disclosed. That would include, by the way, in addition to an infinite number of other things, buying toothpaste and getting a haircut. It would definitely include the taxpayer-financed slush fund that Congress has set aside to pay off its own sexual harassment claims. Yes, those now qualify as campaign contributions. They must be publicly disclosed. Except, of course, they're not publicly disclosed, and they never will be. Why is that? Well, that might be a question for congressional leaders, including, now that we think about it, Congressman Adam Schiff of Burbank, California. He's the incoming chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, a very powerful man in the Congress. What does Mr. Schiff have to say about Congress not disclosing the very same payments that Democrats say Trump should be impeached for not disclosing? Let's ask him.
There's a very real prospect that on the day Donald Trump leaves office, the Justice Department may indict him, that he may be the first president in quite some time to face the real prospect of jail time.
Trump knows that he's facing some pretty strong criminal liability when he leaves office, one way or another. And, you know, even if a sitting president can't be indicted, he's got to know his future looks like it's behind bars unless he cuts some sort of deal with the prosecutors.
So to translate, Trump's a criminal. He's going to jail for committing a smaller version of the same made-up crime that we in Congress have committed for years and forced you to pay for. And by the way, we're never apologizing for that, because we don't have to, and CNN isn't going to make us. Screw you, America, and your stupid election. We're in charge. That's the real message here, in case you missed it. Chris Hahn is a radio host and former aide to Senator Chuck Schumer, and he joins us tonight. So, Chris, I know you don't like Trump. That's fine. But speak slowly so I can understand, and explain to me why paying off someone who is extorting you, threatening to make public details of your personal life if she doesn't get paid, why paying that person is a felony.
Well, first of all, we don't know that there was actual extortion here. We know that a payment was made. There was a catch and kill deal with the National Enquirer. Whether or not it was extortion, that hasn't been proven yet, nor has it even really been alleged in many cases.
Well, I'm alleging.
Hold on.
Let me just stop and say I'm alleging it because it's obvious. You're not going to pay $100,000 or $150,000 or $200,000 to someone unless there's a threat to you and your reputation. This is extortion. Now, I don't know why it's not being prosecuted. I don't know why Trump isn't defending himself on those grounds. I would, but it clearly is extortion. Well, but why is it a crime to pay off someone who you had an affair with?
Sometimes people want to tell us. They want to tell a story that he doesn't want told. He says, "Hey, just tell it to me. I'll pay for it and pay for yourself." That's what he did.
That's what that. If I did that to you, you would call it. If I said, "Look, I know a detail about your sex life, Chris Hahn, and I'm going to tell it on my show on TV unless you pay me," that would be extortion, obviously. So this is extortion. But leaving that aside, why is it a felony to pay women you've had sexual relationships with?
It's not a felony. It's a felony to do a campaign expenditure and not disclose it. And that's what
How is
this
that
has
a campaign
been.
expenditure?
This seems to have been a campaign. He made this during the campaign for the purposes of the campaign. There are tape recordings of him discussing this with Michael Cohen, and that's just
for the purposes of the campaign. But hold on. I'm confused. No, it's not a small thing. It's the thing. This is the crime that the New York Times told us on Saturday. Federal prosecutors are alleging the president committed. It's a felony. And Michael Cohen pled guilty to a species of this. So I just want to get to the bottom of it. Why is that a campaign contribution to pay off a former girlfriend? I'm honestly confused. You're a campaign guy. Tell me.
Look, there's also an allegation that he may have violated the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act when he was doing his deal in Moscow.
There are allegations that he killed Kennedy. But hold on.
There's a lot more to this than just paying off porn
how about
stars
one
who
allegation? One allegation at a time. So federal prosecutors, this is not just something that dumb people on TV are talking about, though they are. This is something that prosecutors in New York State are saying they have apparently evidence to indict over. So tell me why, because a lot of people in Washington pay off their girlfriends, including lots of people in Congress. A lot of people in Congress, including, I'd even guess, some Democrats. Just throwing that out there. So tell me why that's a campaign contribution to pay off your girlfriend.
Well, first of all, I think that fund that Congress was using to pay people off who were harassed needs to be disclosed, and the members who were involved with those disclosure decisions need to be removed.
Oh, I'm sure that'll happen right away. That'll happen right away. I'm sure MSNBC will push real hard for that. Right. Okay.
I
But
agree
tell
with
me
you
why
on-
it's a
I
campaign.
agree with you on that point.
This is a central question. Why is it? And for all of us, why is that a campaign contribution? The money didn't come from the campaign. It didn't go to the campaign. It was a threat to his reputation and his livelihood, as all extortion is. Right. So why is that a campaign contribution?
There's black letter law. There's black letter law here, okay? The campaign finance law is pretty clear about what you can and cannot do with funds. And these funds were not necessarily from Trump's own pockets. There was all sorts of schemes put together by the president and Michael Cohen to move this money around so it wasn't traced back to President Trump.
But hold
that
on.
in and of itself should raise red flags. People would be blowing their mind out right now if this was any other president.
Maybe. I mean, we've never had a president like Trump in a million different ways. And I'm not defending.
No, we never have.
I'm not defending his personal life. I'm merely saying this is now being described as a felony, as a crime for which the president could be removed. So now's the time when we need to be very specific about what the crime is, because you've stopped all business of government so we can respond to this. So let's respond right now. Tell me how and where in campaign finance law it says you're not allowed to use your money. There's no allegation this was campaign money. Your money to pay off a former girlfriend. There isn't. That's made up. It's a lie.
The allegation here is not. The allegation here is not that it's just his money. There's allegation that he moved money around through various schemes to pay these women off.
No, but not from the campaign. No, but by the way, you're allowed to do that too. You're allowed to hide the payments. What is that a crime now?
The payments that were campaign in nature. That is a violation of campaign, a clear violation of campaign finance law.
I'm giving you a chance on TV. Hold on. No, just I'll let you speak, and I'll let you speak slowly so our audience can understand. Where in campaign finance law does it say that taking money that's not from your political campaign to respond to an extortion attempt or pay off your girlfriend or pay the gardener or pay anybody? Why is that a felony? Where does it say that? What are you talking about?
Campaign finance law. Look, I'm not going to quote the section and verse. I don't know it off the top of my head, even though I am a lawyer. But campaign finance law clearly states that any money spent for campaign purposes, specifically by people other than the candidate, must be disclosed.
But
this
why
is
is
what's
that a
being
campaign
alleged right here.
purpose?
Hold on. The president and Michael Cohen clearly set up a scheme so that other people could pay these women off on behalf of Donald Trump while he was running for president because they thought that these allegations would sink his campaign and his reputation.
But maybe
that's a violation.
No, actually, because anybody faced, I don't know a single man who faced with that allegation, who if he thought he could squelch it, wouldn't pay the person off because it does incalculable damage to your reputation, whether you're running for anything or not. And so it's so clearly not a campaign violation that I wonder if we want to set this precedent. Do you want to live in a world where people paying off extortion attempts are now campaign finance felons? I mean, this is lunatic, and you know it.
This is strikingly similar to what happened to John Edwards. I'm
yes,
not
and
saying
it's
the president
awful.
will be
It's
convicted,
awful what happened to John Edwards.
This is strikingly similar situation.
And what happened to him was wrong.
Look,
it was another populist they took out with this BS campaign finance nonsense. Exactly what happened.
Look,
anyway,
it is more than campaign finance law. Well, it's more than campaign finance law. It is the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act.
Well, that's a totally separate thing.
Problem.
Well, look, if he violated that, I won't defend
and it's also
but in this
by
case,
Cohen,
this
it's
is made
also
up.
part of this.
All right. Chris Hunt, thank you.
Thank you,
Good
Tucker.
to see you. One of the most hysterical reactions in the past few days came from a former Obama administration U.S. attorney who says the president should be stripped of his office.
It could be that President Trump procured the presidency by fraud. When immigrants procure their citizenship by fraud, we strip them of their citizenship. When a president procures his presidency by fraud, should we consider doing the same?
Alan Dershowitz is, of course, a retired Harvard Law School professor. He's the author of the book, The Case Against Impeaching Trump, and he joins us tonight. Professor, I got a couple questions, but the first relates just to the soundbite we played. Is there a provision in the Constitution for stripping, whatever that means, stripping the presidency from a president who you think is illegitimate, whatever that means?
Sure, it's called the 25th Amendment, but not on the grounds of illegitimacy. I want everyone out there to imagine the following scenario. Let's assume when Bill Clinton was running for president, Paula Jones came up to him and said, unless you pay me $130,000, I'll reveal our affair. And let's assume Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton together did exactly what it's alleged that Donald Trump and Cohen did together. I guarantee you the New York Times, NBC, MSNBC would be railing against any prosecutor who dared to suggest that this was a violation of the campaign finance law. Everybody would be on the other side of this issue. There'd be Republicans out there saying, strip him of the presidency, impeach him, indict him. Every Democrat would be saying, this is a witch hunt. This is terrible. We need a single standard. If you wouldn't go after Bill Clinton, don't go after Donald Trump. If you're going after Donald Trump, then you have to go after Hillary Clinton for everything that she allegedly did. For example, one of your guests talked about the Federal Corrupt Practices Act. That applies when you bribe a foreign official. What they're arguing is that there was a rumor that maybe somebody offered Putin a penthouse in a tower that Trump was thinking of building in Moscow. And if that had been done, it would be a violation of the FCPA, Federal Corrupt Practices Act. But it's all based on hypotheticals and maybes. And I just want everybody to apply the shoe on the other foot test. If Hillary Clinton were president and the Republicans were saying lock her up, everybody would be on the other side. They'd be screaming about how dare you expand criminal statutes? How dare you expand the criteria for impeachment? Now all these liberal Democrat fair-weather civil libertarians are saying the hell with the Constitution, the hell with civil liberties, put all that aside, get Trump. That's the most important consideration. Get him by any means possible. This is such a danger to our constitutional system that I would hope that true civil libertarians would rebel against it as I am.
Is it unfair to describe this scenario as extortion? I say I know something about your sex life. I know a secret about you that you want to keep, that's non-criminal, but that you want to keep hidden. And unless you pay me money, I'm going to reveal it. That seems like textbook extortion to me. Why is it not?
It is absolutely textbook extortion, and there ought to be a prosecution of any person, man or woman, who approaches any candidate or anybody else and says, unless you pay me money, I'm going to reveal a sex act that occurred. That is absolute classic extortion. And it's shocking that the special counsel looking into this, who has a broad mandate, he described it very broadly, isn't looking into the extortion committed by at least the porn star whose lawyer obviously approached the candidate or the candidate's people and threatened exposure. Otherwise, why would you pay? Just listen to the tape. The tape makes that clear, the tape that Cohen made unwittingly of President Trump. It's clear that they were paying off an extortion in order to prevent these issues from coming out for multiple reasons, to protect his family, to protect his brand, possibly to influence the campaign. Let's remember one more thing. A president can contribute a candidate as much as he wants. If Bloomberg runs for president, he could announce tomorrow, I'm not taking a nickel. I'm putting $1 billion of my own money into this campaign. That's perfectly legitimate. As far as reporting is concerned, it's the campaign that has to report. And if these payments had to be reported, they had to be reported after the election. The reporting time was after the election. So it couldn't have impacted the election. So the absurd notion that he won the presidency by fraud and should be stripped of the presidency reflects incredible ignorance about the timing here and how these statutes operate.
This is getting so crazy, it's making my head spin. I appreciate your coming on and explaining that to us, Professor. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, we've been saying it for a couple of years. Now we have hard scientific evidence that, in fact, big tech is altering and harming the brains of children. Is it time to do something about that? What if you knew it was true? Well, we do know it's true now. We've got details next.
I have always wanted
Well, Google collects more data than probably any other company and probably knows more about you than you do. You'd think this might raise some concerns about the concentration of power, but for years, Congress seems to have cared not at all, either because they were ideologically predisposed to Google or because they were in its pocket. Meanwhile, Google became more and more powerful, ominously powerful. Now, finally, during a lame duck session, Congress has summoned the CEO of Google, Sundar Pichai, to answer some questions about data transparency. Coming to Capitol Hill this week, what should Congress ask him about? Harmeet Dillon has followed this issue maybe more closely than any other attorney in the United States, and she joins us tonight. Harmeet, thank you very much for coming on. So what should be the list of questions?
Well, this is only a subset of the issues that people should be asking Google. That is the subject of the testimony tomorrow. But Google, for years, as you pointed out, has been collecting data and not disclosing to users, number one, the extent of the collection of the data or what they're doing with the data. We have also learned of significant breaches, including today an announcement of a major breach of 52.5 million users in the Google Plus failed experiment in social media. It's not clear when that happened. Google is not disclosing to people exactly what happened and what use has been made of it. And they, as you pointed out, they just get away with it because we have both effete politicians in Washington, even on the Republican side, and government agencies whose tasks it is to examine these issues and protect consumers. So consumers are really at a complete loss. Now, what I expect to happen on Capitol Hill tomorrow is that there'll be some posturing questions written by staffers that members of Congress are going to read out, and you're going to have some focus group tested, jargony, incomprehensible responses from Sundar Pichai designed to placate these folks. There'll be a little bit of a dance, and everybody will go home not understanding what the answers were and not probably going to do anything about it. And this is a real tragedy and missed opportunity, Tucker.
What a shame. I want to ask you about another story, another element of the Google story. Newly leaked emails show that several Google employees plotted to destroy the news site Breitbart after the 2016 election. A secret internal discussion group labeled Resist. Google employees discussed how they could use the, quote, hate speech and fake news labels to justify cutting off Breitbart's ad revenues. Harmeet, this is kind of the stuff of conservative fever dreams that Google would be actually doing something like this. Are you surprised by it, and what can be done in response?
Well, Google, A, I'm not surprised. B, Google is denying it, but there's extensive evidence that Google did this, and they did it in two ways. One way is right after the election, as you mentioned, a number of very excitable left-wing Google executives and employees tried to squeeze Breitbart and other conservative outlets into this hate speech category. They then confessed that after a lot of effort, that was really tough. So they also did a two-pronged approach, and the other side of that approach is having their ad people contact customers and tell them that it might be dangerous or a bad idea to advertise or allow their ads to be placed on conservative news websites like Breitbart and others. And they pointed to some outside groups like Sleeping Giant that makes it a business practice of defaming conservative writers and organizations and use that as a smear. Google also does this in many other ways, like through its YouTube. It categorizes content as sensitive, which automatically both makes it hard to find the content online and also strips that content from the ability to gain advertising revenue. So Google is doing this systematically. Google is doing this purposefully. Google is getting away with doing this, and I think it violates not just some laws, including Communications Decency Act and others, but it violates state laws that have to do with fraud and transparency, unfair business practices, and competition. Yeah. Again, Google is able to get away with this because they contribute to some conservative groups like CPAC, a lot of money to show up at CPAC, and certainly on Capitol Hill they get away with it, and we see nothing done to control this duopoly and monopoly on advertising revenue. It's very dangerous because it's shaping what young people in America who mainly get their news through Google see every day.
Looking back, the Congress allowing Google to become more powerful than the U.S. government, subverting our democracy entirely, That'll be the thing we hold members responsible for, I think, historically. Harmeet Thielen, you will not be held responsible since you're a lonely voice on the right side. Thank you for joining us, as always.
Thanks, Tucker.
Meanwhile, we've been saying it for years. Now there is hard scientific evidence that big tech is, in fact, harming our children. A 60 Minutes report this week highlighted research that shows children who use tablets, smartphones, and other screens for more than 7 hours a day, and that's a lot of kids, believe it or not, are developing different brain structures. Their brains are being damaged by this. Tom Kirsting is a psychotherapist who's written extensively on this subject, and he joins us tonight. You must feel vindicated by this report, Tom.
I do. I'm actually happy to see it, to be honest with you, because it's something I've been speaking about for so many years at lectures and in my book. And now we could finally have some scientific preliminary evidence showing exactly what all of this tech is doing to the brain.
So what is it doing?
Well, first of all, the area of the brain called the cortex, which is the outer layer of the brain, the preliminary study that the researchers conducted shows a premature thinning of that part of the brain, okay? Which is kind of frightening considering the importance of that part of the brain, what it does, how it's very important just for human beings in terms of organizing, planning, and a host of other different things. Another component that you don't hear much about is something called neuroplasticity, which is actually the greatest breakthrough in modern day psychology. And the term plasticity meaning that the brain, although very strong and rigid, can be molded and shaped if placed in the right environment for 3 or more hours per day. We know that the average kid is spending 9 hours a day on average in what I consider to be the most highly stimulating of worlds. And what happens is the brain will actually grow new neural pathways, or will reorganize its circuitry to adapt to that cyber world. And the problem is, what I'm seeing clinically is an unadapting of young kids in the real world, having a very difficult time coping with just the trivial nuances of life, the anxiety disorders, the depressions, and so forth.
Yeah, well, and it's all kinds of measurements are showing the horrifying results of it. How young exactly are kids getting addicted?
Well, we're seeing right now that there's some research that came out recently that there's kids as young as 2 years old showing signs of depression. And right now the average age for first smartphone issuance is about age 10. And, when I give lectures, every parent knows that this is bad, but it's sort of, what you talk about, you love the term groupthink. I use the term social conformity. We tend to do what everybody else is doing. And parents, anybody listening, you have got to do what is in the best interest of your child, not what everybody else around you is doing.
So can you just give me the 20-second answer to the question I always ask you, which is, why are we so passive in the face of this? If 2-year-olds were huffing on Marlboros, we'd say, you know what, no, not allowed. But we just sort of sit back and let our society collapse in the face of this. Why?
Well, the reason, in my opinion, the reason why is, and I always talk about common sense, all right? It's pretty clear if we go walk around and everybody's got their heads buried in a device all day long. You pull up to a traffic light and they can't even contain themselves for a minute without looking at their device. It's pretty clear that it's having an impact on their behavior. Now, the reason why nobody's doing anything about it is because we're always looking for scientific evidence, all right? And now we have some of it, and we're going to start seeing a lot more of it. And we're going to start seeing some changes as a result, Tucker.
Yeah, and we waited too long for the studies to confirm the obvious. Tom, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, Hollywood doesn't need to remake 1984 again. Not that they would, it's probably illegal. But they already do a perfect job of replicating it in real life. They are living the plot line of George Orwell's novel. Kevin Hart is the latest person to be destroyed for statements that he made many years ago. We'll tell you his story after the break. A new decree, and of course everyone obeyed immediately. Kevin Hart's career must be destroyed. Just days after the comedian was announced as the next host of the Oscars, the now irrelevant awards show some people still watch, Hart was forced to step down over tweets and stand-up routines from about a decade ago that some said were anti-gay. Now, these tweets had already come to light. Hart had already apologized for them and said he was changing his routine, but it didn't matter. In today's political environment, there is no such thing as forgiveness or mercy. What you're seeing is instead a particularly powerful form of bullying. Do and think exactly as we say, or else. Larry Elder has fought the forces of conformity for a long time. He's a radio show host from Los Angeles, and he joins us tonight. We're really glad to have you. Larry Elder, thank you. So what's the takeaway from watching what just happened to Kevin Hart?
The takeaway, Tucker, is what the devil are the rules? As you pointed out, Kevin Hart did these tweets some years ago and made anti-gay references in his stand-up some years ago. He apologized back in 2015. The Academy Award people wanted him to apologize again. He refused. Now, the show is going to be carried by ABC. ABC parent company is Disney. Disney also owns ESPN. They've employed Keith Olbermann, who is a Trump hater from way back. And just last year, he tweeted that Trump was a Nazi and dropped a bunch of F-bombs in his tweet. That didn't seem to bother Disney, but Kevin Hart has to go. The other inconsistency, of course, is that other comedians like Amy Schumer, who last year, I think it was, hosted a Democratic fundraiser, has used the F word for gays in a tweet, as has Sarah Silverman, as has Chelsea Handler, all of whom have hosted shows. And finally, you have the instance of Joy Ann Reid on MSNBC, who had a blog 2007, 2008, a very anti-gay post she made, and she wasn't joking, she wasn't a comedian, including dissing the movie Brokeback Mountain and said she hated watching men kiss. She then said she apologized. Then later on, she said she was hacked. NBC did a search to find out whether or not she'd been hacked. Turned out she wasn't hacked, so she either misremembered or lied, and then apologized again. She has a show on MSNBC. So forgive Kevin Hart for not knowing what the rules are.
Well, but what's the best response? I think you're absolutely right. All of us at some point are going to be accused of thought crime, and the mob will come for us. It's inevitable. How do we respond? What's the best way to respond?
You do them on a case-by-case basis. The man apologized, said he had grown. The most horrific tweet was saying that if he came home and saw his son playing with his daughter's dollhouse, he'd break the dollhouse over his head. He later on said he apologized, he's grown as a man, and perhaps the tweet had to do with his own insecurities as a man. So I think that's what you do. You apologize, be sincere, and then keep going. But if people keep beating you over the head over and over again, they're not going to forgive you. I'm not sure what the point is, which is why I believe that Kevin Hart was morally justified in saying, I've already apologized. I'm not going to apologize again. I'm a 40-year-old man. I've apologized. I've grown. Let it alone.
I mean, what happens to a society where the mob feels it has ultimate authority on judgment? No one believes in God, so they have to make their own judgments, hard and fast judgments, and no forgiveness is allowed.
Yeah, and what happens to a society that's so inconsistent? For example, Kanye West is being called an Uncle Tom and a token, a house Negro. That doesn't seem to bother anybody. You got a guy like Al Sharpton who's got a show where he's referred to gays as homos in years past, Jews as interlopers. He falsely accused a white man of raping a black teenager. He has a show on television, every weekend. So, I'm not quite sure what to say, Tucker, other than it's terribly inconsistent. It seems to me there's one rule for people who are conservative and one rule for people who are on the left.
I think it's best just to ignore the noise to the extent you can. I mean, they have an awful lot of power. They'll deplatform you in a second. Larry Elder, we're rooting for you. If they ever try that with you. You always have a home on this show. Good to see you.
I could use the help. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, China just launched a new persecution of the country's Christians. Will anyone in Washington care? Are they too busy taking Chinese money? Plus, Paris continues to be convulsed by the worst riots there in 50 years. What are these riots about? You know what they're about. They're about the Paris Climate Treaty, the spirit of it anyway. The policies they want here are being rejected by both left and right in France, and they're ignoring it because it's too inconvenient to pay attention. Details ahead.